Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Uchenna. In this video, I want to talk about the 10 lessons I have learned personally, from marriage experience. And yeah, it's one day, it's 1 year, it's more than a year and a few months into my own marriage. Um, and I have gleaned, some important lessons for me, that I'm learning. So when I say lessons, I don't mean that they are finalized or they are finality, you know, in their expression. But what I mean is that it's just the beginning. It's basically the foundation. It's more of an introduction, into what I'm going to be learning for the rest of the period. Uh, of course, it's not only 10, but I made it 10 because 10 is a number that looks acceptable. So there could be more than 10. I haven't done a lot of thinking about it. Most of my videos are spontaneous. So I'll just reel out the 10 of them and try to explain them very, very briefly. So these are the lessons I'm starting to learn. Number one, the first thing, is that marriage, of course, as we know, is a union um, that should be entered willingly and consciously between two parties, or maybe even more. But in the context which I'm talking about, the context within which I'm talking about is two people living together, and specifically a male and a female living together. Um, for other types of marriages and relationships, um, these 10 these 10 lessons may or may not apply. So now you understand where I'm coming from. We can start. Number one has to do with I'm learning about boundaries and respect. Um, the thing with boundaries is that when you're living alone, um, you don't really get to feel what boundaries are. You don't really experience anything like boundaries except when you're in the midst of your friends, which is not most of the time. But when you get to start living with somebody 24 hours of the day, then you start feeling the impact, of boundaries, the necessities of giving people their space, the um, the need, to understand your partner and how, and what they like, what triggers them, what doesn't trigger them. Knowing when you're overstepping those boundaries, knowing when you're going into places that you need not go into, or even if you want to go into them, you should know that there are boundaries there too. So it's really amazing, learning about the boundaries and knowing boundaries and respecting boundaries. They go hand in hand. Respecting boundaries really is the bone, is the meat and the bone, of mutual respect for people. Yeah, so that's one of the lessons I'm learning. Very important, very vital to keeping the unit together. The second one is about the nature of human nature, and of course that's a very broad topic, but I'm narrowing it down, to how we think. Um, we we often take for granted, that people understand what we are saying. We believe that we are communicating effectively because we are using language. So I'm understanding, that language really is a very vague thing. So even as I'm speaking now on this video, each person is understanding it completely differently. And in the end, I may not even have communicated what I wanted to communicate. So it's amazing, to believe that when you're discussing with somebody, that you are actually communicating. So I've learned that we think differently. The way we perceive words, even ordinary, like the ordinary everyday words, the way we perceive tonality, the way we think, basically, is different from how the next person thinks. some people don't think in words, some people think in words, but they have different, it's just we are wired differently. That's a very, very important lesson I've learned, and I'll keep observing and seeing how it plays out, because it's amazing to finally realize that our brains don't work the same way at all, and that the language that we're using is taken for granted that the next person understands what I'm saying. Even if I say "come here," you know, it could mean anything to anybody. It could be an insult to somebody. It could be, a welcoming gesture to somebody. It could be an order to somebody. It can be perceived in any way. Yeah. Then number three, I'm learning, about conflict resolution, compromise, basically, negotiation, because you always have to negotiate your way around. You don't get to do things your own way all the time. So there's an extra demand on you. And of course, when there are children involved too, then the demand even becomes higher. Not pressure per se, but responsibilities, roles, increase as the family unit develops. So you must negotiate most things. It could even be any small thing. It could be dinner, food, waking up time, sleeping time, everything. Television, if you watch television, you know, time to walk, time to look after babies and all that. Everything is a negotiation. So you will learn to be, a master negotiator. Remember, all these things are just starting out, so I'm just bringing up things. Then, of course, I lumped it together, with conflict resolution, because there's going to be a lot of conflict of interest, basically. When you want to do something and the other person wants to do another thing, everything is always clashing, 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 clashing. So we are like resolvers. We are conflict resolvers. It's a conflict resolving relationship. It's a compromise building relationship, and it's a negotiation reaching relationship. So then number four, what marriage can actually be defined, as a continuous forgiving relationship between two people, because you have to keep forgiving continuously, maybe even every day. And forgiveness is not something that comes easy for some people, and if it doesn't come easy for you, then you have a lot of lessons to learn, if you are already married or if you're planning to get married. It's a chain of forgiveness, continuous forgiveness. Yeah. And yeah, it's amazing how we just learn that it's not possible for human beings to agree. So that's why, we have to give respect to leaders, governments, and everything that's trying to keep millions of people together and happy. It's not an easy task. When even in the smallest units, of living, it's difficult to do. I can just imagine how it is. Yeah, so that's what we do. We're learning leadership, in the marriage, for both parties, of course. Everything I'm saying applies to two people, to the two parties involved, in the marriage. Then, yeah, so it's continuous forgiveness and reconciliation all the time, steady, 24/7. There's no end to it. The number five, I think this should have come earlier, but I put it as number five. I'm learning about triggers. What triggers me most, because not most, because I'm just saying, you're going to get a lot of um, behaviors or whatever from your partner that will trigger you. When I say trigger, like it will stir up emotions that you don't like, emotions you have been hiding, and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's sorry, it's not funny, but I'm laughing because some of us feel that we have reached the highest level of awakening. Until you get married, then you understand that maybe you haven't even started. So there's going to be a lot of triggers in the marriage because of course, the things I mentioned earlier about conflict resolution. Of course, the difference in human nature, and because we are trying to reach a single goal, and now there's two people instead of one. So those triggers are going to be there. They're going to press your button. That's what they call pressing button. And it's not done intentionally most times. It's just that's just how it is. That's how human beings are. So you cannot expect somebody to be everything that you want to be. They're not machines, so they're not going to be that. Then number 6 has to do with the triggers. As you keep feeling those triggers, as you keep feeling your feelings, as you keep feeling those unwanted feelings, it triggers spiritual growth. So that's number 6, spiritual growth. So a marriage is a place for growing spiritually through triggers, through conflict, through boundaries and respect and negotiation and everything I mentioned before. All these elements are there, to catalyze or facilitate your spiritual evolution and your spiritual growth. Because you haven't really started any spiritual growth if you're just living alone and doing your meditation by yourself and going to sleep and choosing when you see people or not. No. The real test, comes when you are living with another individual. Whoever the individual is, they're going to trigger you into your real spiritual growth. So if you want to grow spiritually, yeah, this is the place to be. Then number 7 has to do with number 6. It's a place to practice, your awakening. For those of you that believe in spiritual awakening, which I believe is the core of my following here. Yeah, so it's a place to practice your holiness. It's a place to practice your goodness because, yeah, I remember a quote from Mother Teresa that if you want to change the world, go back home and love your family. And yeah, and it sounds so true, because if you can't love your family, then you're not going to make any change in this world, because you're just going to be a hypocrite, basically, trying to tell people how to stay together, how to live in peace and all that, and when you cannot even do it at home. So it's a place to practice, your goodness, what you feel, that makes you a good person, a holy and this and that. If your own spouse, doesn't agree with doesn't agree with your practice, of your spirituality, then how do you expect any other person to learn from you? I'm very sorry I'm laughing, but it's really very funny. Yeah. Then number 8 is marriage is also a place, for manifestation. When your energies align, when you and your partner, are in those happy moments where you align and you're in those good moments, a combination of both of your high vibrations, will lead to manifestation on the outside. We need to manifestation of of good things, basically things that will help the family, things that will help the unit to move ahead. But when you're not aligning, then the process of manifestation, is stalled. But you're going to attract beautiful things just by being in the marriage. Two people, two heads are way better than one towards a goal that you're trying to achieve. Yeah, so I can see that too. I've been seeing some of the manifestations that have been happening I don't want to go into specific examples. That's why I'm using abstract concepts to define this, to describe these 10 lessons. Then number 9, you find out that you cannot change anybody. You know, you cannot change your spouse. You cannot make them do what. Yeah, you can force them to do what they don't want to do, possibly through use of fear and all that. But it's not. Of course, you know, it's not a long-lasting technique to use. They will probably be suppressing their true selves, and one day, through suppression, you know, the more you keep suppressing something, one day it will explode in your face. So all the things I mentioned earlier about respecting boundaries, about negotiation and all that, you know, boils down to this basic human nature that we cannot change people. What we can do is to try to understand them, and you know, and then negotiate, you know, every day, resolve, reconcile, make these things I'm mentioning now part of your daily life, and you will enjoy it. Remember, it's only out of the darkness, you know, that the light comes. So it's teaching. Oh, I didn't mention this one in my list, but it's just explaining the meaning of duality and paradox to me. It's just I'll make another video about that. Then number 10, marriage is also a place for happiness. There are very joyous moments, beautiful moments when you're winning together, when you're manifesting together, when you're happy together. You know, there's a lot of happiness there. But of course, there's always a second side to it. When things are not going very well, the happiness subsides, or turns its face, and turns into sadness and anger and disappointment. Yeah, so it's basically a mixed bag. But overall, happiness precedes. Especially when you're manifesting the the goals that you had for the marriage, the plans that you had for yourselves before the marriage. And it's going to take another video to even explain, how. I think I've discussed how to attract a partner. I've done all those things before, so you can watch my other videos on that. And yes, these are the 10 lessons that I am learning from my first. I'm going into the second year in actual marriage. Marriage means when I went to do what's it called? When I went to do the official, culturally sanctioned, politically politically engineered, socially constructed event called a wedding. So that's when I'm counting it from. I'm not counting from when we met. So it's 1.5 years, into the official program of marriage, and these lessons are surfacing, and maybe more. I'll be thinking about more, and I'll be making more videos in the near future. Thank you, and have a very nice day. Thanks for watching.